The wooden door is bolted shut from the inside. The curtains are drawn. Inside, neighbors swore no light ever escaped the cracks. Yet at night they could hear the creaking of floorboards, the low murmur of chanting, and, most disturbing of all, the sound of multiple voices whispering the same word, "Mother." What they did not know was that inside that farmhouse, a woman named Abigail Mullins, a widow of 47, had rewritten the laws of family, of faith, and of flesh. Her 4 sons were not her children anymore. They were her husbands. Abigail Mullins was born in 1832 in a town that does not appear on modern maps. Some records say her father was a preacher. Others claim he vanished before her birth. Either way, Abigail grew up with sermons of judgment, sin, and inheritance ringing in her ears. By the time she married a coal foreman, John Mullins, she was known as pious, strict, and frighteningly calm. John died in 1875, officially of black lung. Unofficially, the coroner's report mentioned bruises across his throat as though strangled. Abigail wore black for a year, then locked her doors. She stopped attending church. When she reappeared, she came with her 4 sons at her side. No longer boys, but silent men who followed her like shadows. The boys were named Thomas, Eli, Jonah, and Samuel, aged 14 to 22. Each was described as pale, hollow-eyed, and unnervingly obedient. They spoke rarely. They walked with their mother in perfect rhythm, like soldiers drilled into step. Neighbors began to notice strange patterns. The sons never courted women. They never left home without her. If spoken to directly, they would pause, as though waiting for Abigail to speak first. And when Abigail smiled, the sons smiled. When she cried, they cried. When she touched their hands, they trembled, not with fear, but something else. By 1880, whispers had spread across the county. Farmers swore that Abigail called her sons "my beloveds." Women at church accused her of unspeakable sins but dared not confront her. A traveling priest, Father O'Malley, described the Mullins farmhouse as an abomination masquerading as home, where the walls themselves reeked of milk and incense. He never returned after one visit. His journals were later found half burned with a single phrase scrawled across a page: "The sons are hers and she is theirs. No lines remain." Would you like me to continue and fully expand sections 5 through 20 in this same style, unfolding the story like a forbidden history, deepening the horror with townsfolk, institutional cover-ups, the church's involvement, and the psychological collapse of the Mullins bloodline? You said, yes, ChatGPT said, perfect. I'll now continue the Mullins Widow script, carrying it through sections 5-20 in the same psychologically heavy, cinematic style. Each section will unravel another layer of this forbidden history until it descends into complete dread. The Mullins widow, who made her own sons her husband's neighbors, recalled that Abigail nailed crosses into every doorframe of her house. But instead of facing outward, they were turned inward, meant not to keep evil out, but to trap it inside. Windows were boarded, cellars bricked, attics sealed. The Mullins home was less a dwelling than a crypt for the living. At night, faint singing echoed across the fields. Women described lullabies too slow, too hushed, too mournful. One farmer's wife swore she saw Abigail and her eldest son standing in the yard in the moonlight, hands interlocked, swaying like lovers at a wedding. In 1881, a midwife named Mrs. Crawley was summoned to the Mullins home. She expected childbirth, but what she witnessed was more grotesque. Inside the parlor, Abigail had arranged her sons in a circle, candles burning at their feet. She asked the midwife to bless a union. Mrs. Crawley refused. Abigail laughed softly and whispered, "The blood that made them mine shall also make them men." What happened next is unclear. Crawley fled screaming into the night. She told the town council that Abigail had married her own children before God. No one believed her. Weeks later, Crawley's farmhouse burned down. Her body was never recovered. By autumn, children began vanishing. A boy named Andrew Finch, age 10, disappeared walking home from school. A girl, Margaret Hill, vanished near the river. Their parents searched, but dogs refused to approach the Mullins property. When questioned, Abigail smiled coldly, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh. Some families are chosen to carry burdens others cannot bear." The Baptist elders convened, but none dared accuse Abigail directly. She had once been the most devout woman among them. To challenge her was to risk admitting their own failure. A traveling bishop was sent. He lasted 2 nights in the county before departing at dawn, pale and shaken, declaring, "The mother is not alone. Something older than Scripture walks with her." The church's silence became complicity. By 1882, Abigail was pregnant again. No man claimed responsibility. Her sons remained in her home, silent and obedient. Neighbors whispered what no one dared say aloud, that the Mullins widow had made herself both mother and wife, womb and altar. When the child was born, it never cried. Witnesses claimed it had no pupils, only black orbs. It died within a week. Abigail buried it in her garden, smiling as though she'd planted a seed. Local records began to blur. Birth certificates went missing. Marriage registries listed Abigail and her sons under false names, dates overlapping in impossible ways. Some claimed she had rewritten official papers. Others believed officials were complicit. One courthouse clerk resigned after seeing Abigail arrive with her eldest son. He swore the man looked exactly like her late husband. Same jaw, same eyes, same mannerisms, as though her sons were becoming the men she had lost. A schoolteacher stumbled upon shallow graves behind the Mullins property. Each held bones too small to be adult. They were hastily buried, some bound with cloth, others still clutching wooden toys. When she reported this to the sheriff, he visited the Mullins farm. He never returned. His deputy filed the case as closed for lack of evidence. The teacher soon vanished as well. In 1883, the Mullins house became a magnet for orphans. Children abandoned, widowed, or unwanted seemed to end up at Abigail's door. None were ever seen again. Some said she promised the church she was taking in the forgotten. But those who lived near her claimed to hear children crying from inside at night, followed by silence. By 1884, the U.S. Census Bureau listed the Mullins household as containing 13 residents. Yet neighbors swore only 5 were ever seen, Abigail and her 4 sons, who were the other 8. The census taker who signed the ledger quit his position within months, later found wandering in Washington, D.C., incoherent, repeating, "The mother has no end. The mother multiplies herself." Local farmers began reporting visions. Some claimed they saw Abigail in their barns, kneeling at the foot of their children's beds, whispering lullabies only the child could hear. Others swore they saw her sons standing in fields at dawn, staring into the horizon as if awaiting orders. Dreams spread across the county, recurring images of a woman nursing not infants but grown men. In 1885, townsfolk tried to burn the Mullins home. They gathered with torches, doused the farmhouse in kerosene and lit it. Flames engulfed the wood, but by morning the house stood untouched, walls blackened but unbroken. The ringleader of the mob was found hanged in his barn the next week, his tongue cut out. By the late 1880s, newspapers stopped printing stories of the Mullins family. Editors received warnings from state officials. A doctor who examined one of the sons, after he collapsed at the mill, was arrested for medical fraud. His notes described an unnatural closeness in the family's bloodlines, as though every sample he drew circled back to the mother herself. The state wanted no record. In 1890, Abigail bore one last child. Witnesses claimed it was neither boy nor girl, neither infant nor fully human. It lived only 3 days. When it died, every animal in the county wailed. Dogs howled, cows bellowed, birds shrieked. Abigail buried it beneath her floorboards. That night, neighbors swore the farmhouse itself seemed to breathe. In 1891, the Mullins family disappeared. Doors swung open. Beds lay unmade. Food rotted on the table. The garden was empty, the graves overturned. Not a trace of Abigail or her sons was ever found. Only one thing remained in the parlor, a circle of chairs, still warm, as though bodies had just been sitting there. The farmhouse stood abandoned for decades. Anyone who entered reported dizziness, nausea, and the overwhelming smell of milk and blood. In 1912, a group of seminary students stayed overnight to debunk the legend. By morning, 3 were missing. The survivors were mute for the rest of their lives. By 1930, the house was razed to the ground, yet locals claimed the land itself whispered. Crops would not grow. Families who built nearby went mad within months. Today, the Mullins name is erased from records. The church refuses acknowledgement, and state archives list Abigail as deceased without issue. But whispers remain that the bloodline never ended. Some say her sons carried her teachings into orphanages, seminaries, and asylums across America, spreading her doctrine of the mother who is also bride. Others claim the family still lives, hidden, passing through generations unseen. And in every town where records go missing, where children vanish, where churches fall silent, one phrase resurfaces, whispered like a prayer and a curse. The sons are hers, and she is theirs. No lines remain,